Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in our series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature from the March of the Machine main set in no particular order, plus the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart, the special pre-release promos, and maybe even the non-face legends from the Mom Commander products, if there's interest. So if you have a request for a commander you'd like to see me build for March of the Machine, or a way you'd like to see me build that deck, let me know in the comments below. As you can see, today our commander is Djeru and Hazoret, respectively the leader of the Ta crop and the god survivor of Zeal, both from Amonkhet. They share an awesome moment in the March of the Machine fiction when Hazoret ignites the glistening oil in the invading Phyrexian's veins, and Djeru leads a squad of warriors to slay them as they writhe. I'm a big fan of the War of the Spark storyline, so I love Hazoret, and I'm excited to show off this sweet team up. But before we get into it, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I wouldn't put them in the command zone if I didn't think they were cool, so I put about 30 cards toward whatever they lead me toward doing. This is my game plan. It's what I'm trying to do at the table, how I want to try and win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction. I'll usually run one or two sweepers. Sometimes I'll do more if it would play into my game plan. Sometimes I do none, but I generally keep my floor of 38 lands so that I can get the spells that are in my hand out of my hand and into play. So let's take a look at our team up commander. Djeru and Hazoret is a 5/4 legendary human god that casts for 2 red-red-white that says, as long as you have 1 or fewer cards in hand, Djeru and Hazoret has vigilance and haste. And whenever Djeru and Hazoret attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may exile a legendary creature card from among them. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, and until end of turn, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So this card cares about 2 things: us having none or just few cards in our hand, and us having many legendary creature cards in our library. I built a lot more toward this second ability than the first one, but this still does come up sometimes. So in building this deck, I started thinking about the aftermath of the Hour of Devastation story. The city of Noctimoon is in ruins, and Hazoret leads the survivors, including Djeru, into the desert. Imagine how crazy it must be to live not just as refugees, but alongside your guardian deity. You're sitting around the campfire, practicing the Amonkhet tradition of storytelling, and in the middle of bragging about your heroics, there's suddenly a real-life goddess looming over you from behind. And you're like, hi. Then again, if you're fighting for your life in the Scouring Sands, hero or no, a jackal-headed giant with a flaming spear is probably exactly who you want to have your back. That's the idea behind this deck. We are brimming with legendary creatures, all of whom can be plucked off the top of our library by our commander and dropped onto the battlefield to join our fight. And each of them can hold their own. They wouldn't be legends otherwise. In point of fact, they work so well together that as often as not, they're more than enough of a threat to our opponents, and our commander can easily get lost in the shuffle, which is exactly what we want. Djeru and Hazoret are not here to take center stage. They are backup, support, a supply line that can protect itself. They keep our army populated as we swing in, rewarding us for doing what Boros does best, making ourselves a nightmare of the combat phase. Every card we play makes our board more cohesive and dangerous, and our commander simply stands behind and watches, deploying new threats each time we attack. They're as much in command of our deck as we are, looking over our shoulder, giving us extra options every turn. We can almost imagine that we're Djeru, sending our soldiers off to battle, forcing our opponents to absorb losses while we get stronger, thanking our goddess for all the help she's given, and then her shadow falls over us and we have to ask the question again. She's right behind me, isn't she? You'll enjoy this deck if you like it when your cards reward you for playing other cards, building a bulwark of value just because you turn them sideways. So, you will find, as usual, this Moxfield list in the deck's description, the video description rather. At the bottom of this deck list, there's a considering section, a bunch of cards that I didn't put in the deck but I thought about. So if you have a bigger budget, there's definitely some more powerful cards, more expensive cards at least, that you can put in if you would like to. Or if you're on more of a budget, there's plenty of other options for that as well. If you want to take it in a different direction, that is a good place to start for suggestions for where to go beyond just what I've done. So Hazoret, or I should say Djeru and Hazoret, hits whenever we look at the top 6 and we see a legendary creature card. But those aren't the only legends we have in the deck. We fully have, I believe, 8 cards that are non-lands and aren't historic. So historic, of course, is legends, sagas, and artifacts. And many of those otherwise are legendary artifacts, that sort of thing. We have a legendary enchantment as well. So there's plenty of legends in this deck. So we're going to start there. We'll talk about plenty of other categories as we go, but we'll start with these 41 legends, most of which, like I mentioned, are creatures and are hits for Djeru and Hazoret. Starting with Arbaz Mir. Forgive me if I'm getting that wrong. I haven't played any of the Assassin's Creed games, but this is from the Assassin's Creed set. For a red and a white, we get a 2/2 legendary human assassin that says whenever it or another non-token historic permanent enters the battlefield under our control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and we gain a life. So a little bit of a Blood Artisty sort of effect here, but it's whenever we get, Blood in the sense that it's a drain. But yeah, it's just whenever a non-token historic permanent enters, which means anything that says legendary on it, anything that is an artifact, or a saga, which we have at least one of. Next we have Horn of Mark, a 2 generic mana legendary artifact that says whenever 2 or more creatures we control attack a player, look at the top 5, reveal a creature from among them, put it in our hand, and put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So we're going to be attacking anyway. So being able to attack with 2 things and essentially draw ourselves a card, that sounds pretty good. I believe every creature in this deck, except for 1, is legendary. So this will let us draw that non-legendary creature if Djeru and Hazoret doesn't let us. Keep in mind though, if one of the legends that we're attacking, or rather one of the creatures we're attacking with here is Djeru and Hazoret, we're going to get their trigger as well as the Horn of the Mark trigger. Next we have, from the Lord of the Rings set, Mary, Esquire of Rohan. Mary is a 2/2 legendary halfling knight for a red and a white. It has haste, and it says Mary has first strike as long as it's equipped, and whenever we attack with Mary and another legendary creature, we draw a card. So you can see the synergy with Mary and a Horn of the Mark, and of course Djeru and Hazoret. So Mary is going to be attacking as a 2/2 haste for 2. That's pretty good. It has first strike when we're attacking, as long as it's equipped, and we have several equipment in this deck. And it draws us cards. Pretty okay for a 2/2 haster for 2. Next we have a non-creature, another one, Mirror of Galadriel, also from Lord of the Rings. 2 generic mana for a legendary artifact that says pay 5 generic and tap to scry 1 and draw, but it costs 1 generic less, to activate for each legendary creature we control. So it will not take long for Mirror of Galadriel to be a 2 mana card that taps to opt every turn. We just get a free scry and draw. This is a great card to swap out if you want to put more creatures in, because we have lots of different ways to get card advantage in this deck, but the ability to scry is also pretty nice before we get that draw. And maybe we see something on top of our library that we know it is like a land, for example, which we want, but we don't want to be in our cards that we reveal off of our Djeru and Hazoret trigger. So maybe we clear a land off the top and we have more options for what we see when we resolve that trigger. Next is Sarah Jane Smith, a very classic Magic style name from the Doctor Who set. For 1 and a white, Sarah Jane Smith is a 2/1 legendary human detective that says whenever you cast a historic spell, investigate. This triggers only once per turn, and also Doctor's Companion, which is not relevant in this deck. So whenever you cast a historic spell, make a clue is pretty good. We get artifact tokens, we can crack them, draw our cards, we don't have to tap them to do so. Pretty alright. Sarah Jane Smith is just meant to be a cheap way for us to get card advantage, even if it takes a little longer because we have to pay for the clues. Next we have Sword of the Animist, another legendary artifact. For 2 generic mana, we get an equipment that says equipped creature gets +1/+1, and whenever equipped creature attacks, we Rampant Growth. We search for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tap, and shuffle. So this is, in our Boros deck, a very good way for us to get our basic lands into play. And also Sword of the Animist equips for just 2. So maybe we play this on 1 turn, and then the next turn we can play Mary and equip the Sword of the Animist, and now Mary is a 2/2 haste first strike that rampant growths us when we attack with it. Pretty solid. And Sword of the Animist, I hate to say, is one of our more expensive cards. I do try to keep cards that are more than $10 out of my decks, unless they're really important to it. So this one's right there on the edge. But solid ramp for our Boros deck. Next is the Iron Crag from Wilds of Eldraine. 2 generic mana for a legendary artifact that is a mana rock. Taps for colorless mana. But also, whenever a legendary creature we control enters, we can have the Iron Crag become Everflame Hero's Legacy, a legendary equipment that has equip for 3 generic, and equipped creature gets +3/+3. If we do that, the Iron Crag is not the Iron Crag anymore, and it loses its other abilities, like being able to tap for mana. So really, this is in here to be a legendary mana rock. But if we need some equipment, we can sure use something that gives +3/+3. Next up is Arni Metalbrow from March of the Machine Aftermath. For 2 and a red, Arni is a 3/3 legendary human berserker that says whenever a creature we control attacks, or a creature we control enters attacking, we can pay 1 and a red, and if we do, we can put a creature card with mana value less than that creature's mana value from our hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. So, pretty sweet. As I read this, whenever a creature we control attacks, we'll trigger Arni. We pay this 2 mana, we put a creature with mana value less than that creature's mana value from our hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. We have now had a creature enter attacking, so we can do it again. I believe Arni lets us chain multiple creatures as long as we play them in decreasing mana value. Pretty sweet. Arni is a madman. Why would he headbutt a troll and a Phyrexian? Good question. Next up is Boromir, Warden of the Tower from Lord of the Rings. For 2 and a white, Boromir is a legendary human soldier that is a 3/3 with vigilance that says whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. So Boromir offers us some really nice protection that way from people who want to cascade into things, discover things. If someone's dropped an Omniscience, they don't get to have those things resolved unless they have something that makes them uncounterable. Pretty nice. But the reason we have Boromir in the deck is because Boromir says, sacrifice Boromir, creatures we control gain indestructible until end of turn, and the ring tempts us. So the ring tempting us is a nice little bonus, but being able to give all of our creatures indestructible until end of turn, it's worth losing Boromir. We'll miss you, buddy. Next is another Lord of the Rings card. Lord of the Rings, like most Universes Beyond sets, had a lot of legends in it, so we've got this. Crown of Gondor is a 3 generic mana legendary equipment that says equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each creature we control. So that's pretty big in our creatures deck. It equips for 4, but that costs 3 less if we're the Monarch. And whenever a legendary creature we control enters, if there is no Monarch, we become the Monarch. So, as you recall, I hope, and if you don't recall, then I'll tell you now, the Monarch is a status given to a player that if someone has a card like this one that says, you become the Monarch, at that point, there will always be a Monarch in the game until the game is over. The Monarch means 2 things. It means, at your end step, if you're the Monarch, draw a card, and whenever you do combat damage to a player, if that player was the Monarch, you become the Monarch. So, when this Crown of Gondor is on the battlefield, if there is no Monarch, all we have to do is play any one of our creatures in this deck, other than that one exception, and we become the Monarch. And while we're the Monarch, this only equips for 1. So we drop a legendary creature with Crown of Gondor and a different legend in play, we become the Monarch, we equip that first creature for 2, or the creature that was already in play for 1 rather, and it gets +1/+1 for each creature we control, including itself. So pretty fun, and the Monarch is always a good time in Commander. Next up, from the Final Fantasy set, actually this is the Final Fantasy Commander set, we have Elena, Turk Recruit. I don't know anything about Final Fantasy, so if you are a Final Fantasy head, let me know in the comments below why she is so legendary. But in any case, when Elena enters, we return target non-assassin historic card from our graveyard to our hand, and whenever we cast a historic spell, we put a 1/1 counter on Elena, who is a 1/4 human assassin for 2 and a white. So Elena is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger because all of our creatures, except for one, are historic. We have a bunch of artifacts. All of those are historic, and we have at least two enchantments that are historic because one is a saga and one is legendary. So all of those are going to trigger Elena's second ability, and we're going to be able to get one of our non-assassin historic cards back from our graveyard whenever she comes in. That doesn't have to be a creature, but it likely will be. So Elena seems like a nice supplement to this deck, and really great art. Good job, Magali. Oh, of course it's Magali. Of course it's great art. Next up, another Lord of the Rings one, we have Gimli of the Glittering Caves. Gimli is 2 and a red for a legendary dwarf warrior. He's a 1/1 double strike, and whenever another legendary creature we control enters, put a 1/1 counter on Gimli. So Gimli's going to get big and threatening right away. And whenever Gimli deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure. So that, with double strike, means as long as Gimli isn't blocked and isn't removed, we're getting 2 treasures just because we attacked with him. Pretty sweet. Next up, another dwarf from Lord of the Rings. And forgive me, Lord of the Rings lovers. This is Glowin. We'll say Glowin, Dwarf Emissary. Glowin is 2 and a red for a 3/3 legendary dwarf advisor that says whenever we cast a historic spell, we make a treasure token, but only once per turn. So generally, once per turn, we're going to be making a treasure token. In addition, we can tap Glowin and sacrifice a treasure to goad a creature, which of course means until our next turn, that creature has to attack each combat if it's able to, and it can't attack us if there's any other option. It has to attack a different player. So yeah, Glowin seems like a good way of getting incremental treasures just because we're casting spells. It's sort of like getting a rebate every time we cast a historic spell. And then we can use those to protect ourselves on an opponent's turn by tapping Glowin, sacrificing the treasure, and goading a creature before they get a chance to attack us with it. Next, we have Lelia, the Blade Reforged, originally from the Strixhaven Commander decks. So Lelia is 2 and a red for a 2/2 legendary spirit warrior with haste that says when she attacks, exile the top card of our library and we can play it this turn, and whenever one or more cards are put into exile from our library and or our graveyard, put a 1/1 counter on Lelia. So Lelia's last ability is triggered by her second ability. So whenever Lelia comes in, we can attack with her right away. When she attacks, we exile the top card and immediately put a counter on her, so she attacks as a 3/3. But also, Djeru and Hazoret, we get to look at the top cards of our library and exile one of them, and when we do that, we've put a card into exile, and now Lelia gets a counter. That seems pretty good to me. Just being able to pump her up bigger and bigger, she gives us a little card advantage just by attacking with her, and we can swing in with a bigger and bigger Spirit Warrior. In addition, Lelia has a little bit of a reputation as being a tough card to deal with, so she might be good removal bait. Just a 3/3, essentially a 3/3 for 3, because the first time she attacks, she's going to become a 3/3. I would rather lose that than some of our more powerful or more synergistic pieces, so yeah. Next up, a great card from the Brothers' War, it's Lauren of the Third Path. For 2 and a white, we get a 2/1 legendary human artificer with vigilance that says when she enters, destroy a target artifact or enchantment. That's just a Reclamation Sage. Great. But also, she sticks around as a 2/1 vigilance that says tap, you and target opponent each draw a card. So we can keep her up until the end step of our opponent to the right, and then whoever we want to be politicking with, whoever we want to make a deal with, we can offer them a card draw, and we get one as well. And we can keep doing that over and over and over. Seems like a big benefit from the Golgothian Silex. Next up, we have Redain, God of the Worthy. So this is another god in our deck. We actually have a few of them. Redain is a really cool card in this deck, so check this out. Redain is 2 and a white for a 2/3 legendary god with flying and vigilance that says snow lands your opponents control enter tapped. Not everyone's playing snow lands, but the few people that are won't be a big fan of this. But also, non-creature spells your opponents cast with mana value 4 or greater cost 2 generic mana more to cast. That's pretty great. being able to take whoever we have at the table who is a big spells person. Maybe they have the Prismari Precon and they want to cast these huge instants and sorceries. They're going to have to spend more mana to do so. However, Redain is a modal double-faced card. The backside is Valkmira, Protector's Shield. Valkmira is 3 and a white for a legendary artifact, so also legendary, that says if a source an opponent controls would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent one of that damage. And whenever you or another permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless its controller pays 1. So this ability, if we ignore these words, the you or, whenever another permanent you control becomes the target, etc., all of that amounts to all your permanents other than Valkmira have Ward 1. The only reason this isn't exactly Ward 1 is because Ward affects permanents, and this affects permanents and us. So this is better than Ward 1 for all of our things, because it doesn't apply to Valkmira, but it does apply to us. So a little bit of a triggered ability that will trip people up. You know, people, if you're at a nice pod, people say, oh, it has Ward, I didn't realize. Do you mind if I take that back? And usually people will say yes. If you're at a, what's a better word than not nice? If you're at a fair pod, let's say, if people are abiding by the rules and they want to be held to their account that way, then you could say, sorry, Valkmira is giving all of my stuff, including me, Ward 1, your thing gets countered. Plus, being able to prevent that damage is pretty nice. So now, I know you're thinking, Valkmira seems good, but Redain is the hit, right? Like, we can only cast Redain when it comes to the Djeru and Hazoret trigger. That's not true. Because Djeru and Hazoret trigger... Let's actually take a look at them again. Djeru and Hazoret's trigger says, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may exile a legendary creature card from among them. And then until end of turn, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So Redain is a legendary creature card. So it's a hit for Djeru and Hazoret. And then it gets exiled, and we may cast that card until end of turn without paying its mana cost. Being a modal double-faced card, we may cast, if we're casting the card, we may cast either side of it. We only got to put it in exile because it was a legendary creature. It doesn't have to be that side that we cast from exile using Djeru and Hazoret's permission that it gives us. So we can cast Valkmira off of the Djeru and Hazoret exile. That's how modal double-faced cards work. So a little bit of a trick here. People may not expect us to be able to drop the shield, but even if we don't want to, this is a 2/3 flyer with vigilance that makes our opponent's non-creature spells cost more if they already cost a lot. That seems pretty good. I like Valkmira a little bit more, but 2 different options, both are delightful. Next up, we have another Doctor Who card. This is Tegan Jovanka. I don't know who this is, so if you want to let me know in the comments, please do. Tegan is 2 and a white for a 2/2 legendary human with the ability Brave Heart. Not one word, it's not a movie. Whenever you attack, target attacking historic creature gets +1/+1 and gains indestructible until end of turn. And Tegan has Doctor's Companion, which again isn't relevant to this deck. So this means any of our creatures, other than that one particular one, which we'll see soon, every one of our legendary creatures is available to have this target them. So whenever we attack, it doesn't have to be with Tegan, one of our creatures gets +1/+1 and indestructible until end of turn. At the very worst, this protects our commander. So we attack with Djeru and Hazoret, we get our attack trigger off of it. Djeru and Hazoret isn't going to die. It's not going to be destroyed because it's indestructible. And we get that extra +1/+1, which is pretty nice. This is a cheap, useful, utility creature for protecting us with our attacks and making sure that we can likely get in, especially because if our opponent knows our creature is indestructible, they may choose not to block because they're not getting a trade out of it unless they can just block and have the creatures just bounce off of each other. So yeah, that way we get a little more combat damage in. Seems good to me. Next we have, this is such a cool card, the Peregrine Dynamo. This is an artifact creature that is legendary, so it's a legendary creature. It is a 3 generic mana, 1/5 legendary construct with haste that has the ability for 1 and tap, copy target activated or triggered ability you control from another legendary source that's not a commander. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this is activated abilities and triggered abilities, as long as they're not mana abilities, which I don't think any of ours are. We get to copy them, and we can do it the same turn because the Peregrine Dynamo has haste. So we can't double up on our Djeru and Hazoret triggers, but we've got lots of other cards that we can copy the triggers for, and that's pretty sweet. I mean, Tegan triggers, we pay 1 and tap the Peregrine Dynamo to give 2 of our attackers +1/+1 and indestructible each. Lauren triggers, when she comes in, we blow up 2 things. When we cast a historic spell, create a treasure token, this ability triggers only once each turn, but we can copy that triggered ability. Once it's on the stack, we get both of those treasures. Lots of different cool things we can do with Peregrine Dynamo because so many of our activated and triggered abilities come from legendary sources. So yeah. Next, from the recent Edge of Eternity set, it's the Sarima, which I still hold should be the Seriema. The Sarima is 1 and double white for a legendary spacecraft that says when it enters, search your library for a legendary creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. It just draws us whatever legendary creature we need most at the moment. And then it has station, so we can tap creatures we control at sorcery speed to put charge counters equal to their power on the Sarima. Once the Sarima has 7 charge counters on it or more, it has flying and is a 5/5 creature. That also says other tapped legendary creatures you control have indestructible. So if we're attacking with something that doesn't have vigilance, if it's legendary, it's indestructible. Another great way to protect our things. And if we don't want to, this is a little bit of an edge case, I believe, but we can activate station at sorcery speed, tap down one of our creatures, and no one can respond to that by destroying our creature before it becomes tapped, because tapping is the cost for stationing this. So even if we've already got the Sarima already stationed up to 7, we can still use its station ability to keep tapping our creatures down and protecting them if we choose to. Maybe not going to come up that often, but you never know. We just have to do this as a sorcery, so we can't do it in response to a kill spell. But in any case, 5/5 flyer that makes our other stuff indestructible if we attack with it without vigilance sounds good to me, and it draws us a card. Would you pay 3 mana for a tutor for your best creature? You can, and get a spaceship out of it afterwards. Next up, this card is insane. This is Vinet, Heart of Hydaelyn. If I've mispronounced any of that, I'm not surprised. I don't know Final Fantasy. So tell me in the comments if this person is important. I assume she is, because she does a lot in this game. Vinet is 1 and double white for a 3/3 legendary Elder Wizard. Elder tells me she's probably important. That says whenever you cast a legendary spell, draw a card. This triggers only once each turn. An extra card every turn is still pretty good. It doesn't have to trigger that many times. But also, for 7 and tap, we have Hero Sundering. Exile target non-land permanent. That's just part of what this does. We pay 7, which is the cost of a Meteor Golem anyway, and we exile a non-land, it's gone, and then Vinet transforms, only as a sorcery. Vinet transforms into Hydaelyn, the Mother Crystal. Seems very cool. Hydaelyn is a 4/4 indestructible legendary god that says Blessing of Light. At the beginning of combat on our turn, we put a 1/1 counter on another creature we control, and until our next turn, it's indestructible. And if it's legendary, we draw a card. Why not? So we're getting so much value out of Vinet, and Vinet costs 3 mana. This card seems really good. Why is it only 59 cents? Great question. Next up, we have Bel Borca, Spectral Sergeant. Bel Borca is 2, a red, and a white for a star 5 legendary spirit soldier that says, note the mana value of each card as it's put into exile. That doesn't say the mana value of each card of yours, each card that you put into exile. It probably will just be us, but it's important to note. Get it? Bel Borca's power is equal to the greatest number noted for it this turn. So If at any point in our turn we exile a card, or someone exiles a card, we make a note of what the mana value was when it was put into exile, and that's going to be Belborka's power for this turn. Seems a little situational until you read the last ability. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. So at the very least, Belborka is a 0/5 for 4 that essentially draws us a card every turn. And then whatever we're getting off the top is going to be Belborka's power that turn. So it's probably not going to be a 0/5. Pretty sweet. Good card advantage. Next up, oh, I think this card is really cool. Kadrik, Soul Kindler from Dominaria United Commander. Kadrik is a 4/3 legendary dwarf wizard for 2, a red and a white, that says the legendary rule doesn't apply to tokens you control. Kind of neat. And whenever another non-token legendary permanent you control enters, you may pay a generic mana. If you do, create a token that's a copy of it. It gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So this is really sweet. You get a bonus creature every turn that only lasts for that turn, but only costs you 1, and you get to attack with it hastily. I mean, we've seen this effect in several different places, but being able to do it with your legends as well just seems like a lot of fun. Being able to have, an extra Peregrine Dynamo that you can duplicate things on, another Belborka maybe, another Venet. Yeah, very cool. You can even have, if you have Kadrik out, you can play your commander. And immediately it comes out, pay 1 more, and we get a hasty version of it if it didn't already have haste, because our hand was depleted. Seems great. Next up, oh goodness, a lot of proper names in a Legends deck. Who would have thought? Eomer, Marshal of Rohan, is 2 and double red for a 4/4 legendary human knight with haste that says whenever one or more other attacking legendary creatures you control die, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. This ability triggers only once each turn. So this doesn't have to happen during our combat phase. Oh, I'm sorry, it does. Whenever one or more attacking legendary creatures you control die. So if we attack with our legends, we get to have another combat phase. That seems pretty good. If we have combined that with something that, like Venet or Redain or something else like Boromir, that's given our creatures some sort of protection, all we have to do is have one of our creatures die and everything else gets to attack again. It's pretty unlikely that our opponents have prepared for this, especially because we can drop Eomer and do this right away, hastily. Seems fun. So after Eomer, we have Eowyn, Fearless Knight. Eowyn is a little bit in this deck of a, we want to drop this and win now, or just kill one of our opponents now. Eowyn is 2, a red and a white, for a 3/4 legendary human knight with haste that says when Eowyn enters, exile target creature an opponent controls with greater power. Legendary creatures we control gain protection from each of that creature's colors until end of turn. So if we play this right, if we have an opponent that has, maybe they're playing Simic, and they have 1 Simic creature out with a power of at least 4, which in Simic they probably do, we exile that thing and it's just gone. It's not O-ringed or anything, it's just exiled. And now all of our creatures have protection from blue and green, and we can swing in with everything, hopefully not dying from it. I mean, they can't block our creatures if we have protection from those things. If their blockers are a color that if our creatures have protection from colors that their blockers are, those blockers cannot block. Their creatures, I should say. And then we swing in, we do a bunch of damage. This is a simple enters effect. So we don't get to have that more than once, but we are left with a 3/4 hasty legend. It seems pretty good to me. Also, incredible art. Oh, it's Magali again. You keep getting me. So next up, for another great piece of art that isn't Magali, not that I don't dislike Magali, I love her, but Zach Stella did a great job with Gerard Weatherlight Hero. This is 2, a red and a white, for a 3/3 legendary human soldier with first strike that says when Gerard dies, exile it, and return to the battlefield all artifact and creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. So if Gerard dies, everything else that died comes back and Gerard gets exiled. It doesn't even bring them all back tapped. It's not like pseudo-regenerate. So if we want to make a big swing and we're not sure that everything's going to survive, as long as we can make sure Gerard doesn't survive, we do all right. But Gerard is a pretty good attacker too. A 3/3 first strike, pretty good. Next up we have Jazal Goldmane, recently reprinted in Foundations. For 2 and double white, we have a 4/4 legendary cat warrior with first strike, more first strike, that has the ability for 3 and double white. We can give all of our attacking creatures +X until end of turn, where X is the number of attacking creatures. So Jazal wants us to go wide, and we're going to. We've got a lot of legends. We want to protect them. The way we protect them is by giving them a huge toughness based on the huge width of our attacking creatures, the width of our board. So Jazal, this is also a really lovely ability to activate and then duplicate with the Peregrine Dynamo for just 1 more. Seems like a lot of fun. Next is Audric, Master Tactician. Audric, I think, is a vampire now in the fiction, but we don't need to get into that. Audric is 2 and double white for a 3/4 legendary human soldier, again with first strike, that says whenever Audric and at least 3 other creatures attack, you choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. So as long as we're attacking with 4 creatures, including Audric, and probably that's going to include Djeru and Hazoret as well, we get to decide, if we want to, that no creatures block. We can say which creatures block, none of them. And we can just get in and hit our opponent for as much as we're attacking for. But if it looks like there's creatures that we can happily kill without having to trade our creatures for them, or if we even want to trade, that's fine. We're allowed to do that too. The only restriction here is that Audric has to attack, and there have to be at least 3 other creatures attacking as well in order to trigger this ability. So even if we attack with Audric and 3 other creatures, this triggers, and then they remove a creature with the trigger on the stack, or after the trigger has resolved, we still have gotten to choose, we still have the ability to choose blockers, even before we've moved to the declaration of blockers step, and if there are too few creatures now attacking. If the ability's gone on the stack and resolved, we are done. Next up, we have Adriana, Captain of the Guard from Dominaria United Commander. Adriana is 3, a red and a white for a 4/4 legendary human knight with melee. Melee means when this creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each opponent we attacked this turn. So at the very least, if we're attacking an opponent, she's going to get +1/+1, so she's a 5/5. If we have 3 opponents and we have 3 creatures and they're all attacking a different opponent, Adriana will get +3/+3. But it's not just her, because she gives other creatures we control melee. So we attack with all of our creatures, and all of them get a bonus to their power and toughness equal to the number of opponents we're attacking. So Adriana also wants us to go wide and spread out the damage as much as we're able to. Seems like a lot of fun. Next is Aurelia, the Law Above. I know you were thinking there was going to be a different Aurelia in here, and I don't believe I kept in Aurelia, the War Leader. She's in the considering section, but she's just expensive. Even though she's very good in this deck. So give her some consideration if you would like to replace one of these creatures with her. In any case, Aurelia the Law Above is sweet as well. For 3, a red and a white, we get a 4/4 legendary angel with flying, vigilance, and haste that says whenever a player attacks with 3 or more creatures, we draw a card, and whenever a player attacks with 5 or more creatures, Aurelia deals 3 damage to each of our opponents and we gain 3 life. I would like to draw your attention to 2 things. The first one is, if a player attacks with 5 or more creatures, they are also attacking with 3 or more creatures, so both of these abilities will trigger. As long as a player is attacking with 5 or more creatures, we get a card, we get 3 life, and everyone takes 3 damage. But also, it doesn't say whenever you attack. It says whenever a player attacks. So this is going to trigger on other people's turns as well, even if they're attacking us. If someone attacks us with 3 creatures, we draw a card. If one of our opponents attacks a different opponent with 5 or more creatures, we're going to draw a card, gain 3 life, and both of those opponents and any other opponents will take 3 damage. Aurelia is great. This is something that's easy to forget about, that it works on every player, so make sure you're paying attention if Aurelia is on the battlefield. Next up, we have another Assassin's Creed card. This is Bayek of Siwa. Bayek? Pardon me, I don't know how to pronounce Bayek's name. Let me know in the comments how badly I've done this, or how well. Maybe I got it right. You never know. Bayek is 3 generic, a red, and a white for a 3/4 legendary human assassin with double strike. 3/4 with double strike sounds good. And it says during your turn, other historic creatures you control have double strike. Well, goodness, that's every one of our creatures except for one. So being able to have all of our creatures have double strike as long as it's our turn is pretty good. But not just that, Bayek has Disguise for 1, a red, and a white. Which means while Bayek is in our hand, we can cast it for 3 generic mana, face down, and it's a 2/2 creature with Ward 2. And then at any time we want, we can pay 1, a red, and a white to turn it face up, and suddenly it's not a 2/2 anymore with Ward 2. It's a 3/4 double strike that gives all of our other creatures, all of our other historic creatures double strike during our turn. So this is a great thing for us to have played. We just got it in play for the 3 generic mana. We attack with several things. Maybe our opponent makes some blocks, and suddenly we pay the disguise cost to flip Bayek up, and now all of those things our opponents blocked have double strike, as long as they're historic, which almost all of our creatures are. This seems like a fun trick, and just a good bump up for what we have. Next, we have Commander Liara Porter. Porter? Yeah, Liara Porter. That seems right. This is a 5/3 legendary human soldier for 3, a red, and a white that says whenever you attack, spells you cast from exile this turn cost X less to cast, where X is the number of players being attacked. And exile the top X cards of your library until in a turn you may cast spells from among those exiled cards. So this card is really cool. From Baldur's Gate, by the way. When we attack, let's say it's with Djeru and Hazoret, we're going to be able to get Djeru and Hazoret's trigger and Liara Porter's trigger. Liara is going to make all of the spells we cast from exile cheaper, even though we don't have to pay the cost for what we exile with Djeru and Hazoret, but we will pay the cost on whatever other cards we exile from the top with her trigger. So yeah, this is another card that incentivizes us to attack multiple players at the same time. Seems like fun. Next up is Gandalf the White. This is not the Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny, but still pretty good. 3 and double white for a 4/5 Avatar Wizard with Flash. So Gandalf can flash in, but not just that. When you do, all of our legendary spells and artifact spells can be cast as though they had Flash. So that's not just legendary artifacts, that's legendaries of any sort and artifacts of any sort. We can cast them all with Flash. That is enough to put Gandalf in this deck. But in addition, Gandalf is a Panharmonicon effect. If a legendary permanent or an artifact entering or leaving the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent we control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. We have 8 or so, I think, ways for this to trigger in our deck. Not so many. But I mentioned, this is enough for us to put Gandalf in the deck. And being able to have this multiple different times as well is pretty great. We have a lot of triggers that come up with our creatures attacking or doing damage. But we have a few things that will trigger when one of our things leaves or enters the battlefield. I do want to draw your attention to the fact that it does not require the artifact or legendary permanent to be the thing triggering. Just it entering or leaving, if it triggers something else on one of our permanents, that still gets double triggered. That's Gandalf. Next up is God Eternal Oketra. I love this card. I'm going to build a commander deck out of her one day. It's a shame to have the zombified version, the eternalized version, I guess, of Hazoret's sister goddess in the deck, but we can be a little rude. So God Eternal Oketra is 3 and double white for a 3/6 legendary zombie god with double strike. Double striking 3/6. Sounds great. I know you're thinking, but where's the reach? Doesn't she have a bow? Just go with it. Things have happened to her. God Eternal Oketra says, whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 4/4 black zombie warrior creature token with vigilance. So every time we cast any of our creatures, we get a bonus 4/4 with vigilance. And when God Eternal Oketra dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, we can put it back into our library, third from the top. So if we want to get her back out, we sure can. Next up is Hero's Podium. Oh, I did put Aurelia in here. I left her in. Oh, yeah, because she's expensive, but she's really good in this deck. Regardless, we've got Hero's Podium first. For 5 generic mana, this is a legendary artifact that says each legendary creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other legendary creature you control. So people who are tired of playing against Joda the Unifier, you're doing it again. All of our stuff gets bigger because of all of our other stuff. Sounds great. But not just that. For X and tap, we can look at the top X cards of our library, reveal a legendary creature from among them, put it in our hand, and put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So very much the same thing that Djeru and Hazoret does for us, but without us having to attack, we just pay the mana. Alright, next up is another Assassin's Creed card, Suitor, Fiery Jotund. Suitor is 3 and double red for a 5/5 legendary giant god warrior, another god, that has trample. 5/5 trample for 5, pretty good. But not just that, whenever we cast a historic spell, Suitor deals 3 damage to any target. That's sweet. Every time we cast more than half of our deck, this card lightning bolts something. That's pretty great. So yeah, Suitor is here to be removal for us. He's here to maybe even be a little bit of politicking. We can say, hey, everything I'm casting is going to trigger this guy. I don't have to bolt you. I can bolt someone else, but what will you give me for it? And in the process of that, people will not enjoy knowing that kind of like extortion's happening at the table. So Suitor becomes, or Searcher? Whoever this guy is, correct me in the comments below, please. He's great. I like him very much. And people are going to see him as a really good option for removing. So they're going to spend their removal spells on him rather than our commander. Removal bait is never to be underestimated. Next up, we have the card that I thought I didn't put in, but I did. I just put a cheaper version, which is the Multiverse Legends version. I would have liked to put in the Aurelia the War Leader from Foundations, because I like to emphasize Foundations because it helps people get into Magic. But this is appropriate with the cool Ravnica frame. In any case, Aurelia the War Leader is a 3/4 legendary angel for 2 red, white, that has flying, vigilance, and haste, and whenever Aurelia attacks the first time each turn, untap all your creatures. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So we get to attack twice. We've seen that once before, but why is that good in this deck? Well, for the same reason that if you look up decks running Djeru and Hazoret as its commander, you're going to see a lot more of this. There's a few more options for this effect in the considering section on the Moxfield page below. The reason for that is because our commander has an attack trigger. So if we can protect our commander, we want to be able to attack and get multiple cards off of that attack trigger that we can cast post-combat. Aurelia lets us do that. Next up, it's Atali, Primal Storm. Love Atali. Look at this big dino. For 4 and double red, we get a 6/6 legendary Elder Dinosaur that says whenever Atali attacks, we exile the top card of each player's library and we may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. That means us too. So if we have 3 opponents, we just attack with Atali and we have the possibility of casting 4 spells for free. We steal them off our opponent's library tops, we steal them off the top of our own library. If we exile a land, that's too bad. But it's not always going to be a land. Atali can give us so much value over time and is such a cheap card in terms of currency. Like, I feel like Atali has become maligned at casual commander tables as being sort of boring. It's not boring to be able to get a bunch of cool spells from the variety of decks your opponents will bring. Atali is a good time. Next up, we have another way of getting multiple combats. It's Morag, Fury of Akum. Each creature we control, Morag says, gets +1/+0 for each time it is attacked this turn, and Morag has landfall, get an additional combat phase. That's all it needs. I mean, it's 4 and double red for a legendary 6/6 Minotaur Warrior, so a 6/6 Minotaur Warrior is pretty great. But being able to have, did you play a land, we'll take 2 combats, and all of your creatures get +1/+0 the next combat, the second combat, if they attack the first one, seems pretty good to me. I love Drakoseth. Drakoseth is 4 and triple red for a 7/7 legendary dragon with flying. When it attacks, it does 4 damage to something and 3 damage to up to 2 other somethings. These can hit players, these can hit planeswalkers, these can hit battles, probably shouldn't at this point, but definitely other creatures. So this is good removal just for attacking with your 7/7 dragon. A 7/7 dragon's enough. Now, can you do the 4 damage to one thing and one of the 3 damages to the same thing? You cannot. But you can sure do that 4 damage to your opponent before you do the 7 damage from Drakoseth hitting them. So that's a solid 11 damage, plus you bolted 2 things. Love Drakoseth. I also really like Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight. If you've seen some of my other commander decks that have Boros colors in them, I put Gisela in not everything, but certainly in these ones. Gisela is 4 a red and 2 white for a 5/5 legendary angel with flying and first strike that says if a source would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, that source deals double damage to that player or permanent instead. It does not say if a source you control would deal that damage. So now all of our opponents are doing double damage to each other. And we're doing double damage to all of them. And if a source would deal damage to us or a permanent we control, prevent half that damage rounded up. So our opponents are doing double damage to each other and half damage to us. That might make them try and gang up on us, but they're definitely going to do very poorly in combat versus us when we block. So the best way to do this is to remind them it incentivizes them to hit each other. If we play Gisela in a strategic way, which is to say we wait until our opponents to our right are in, or rather to our left, are in a powerful position creature-wise, we can then drop Gisela and say, you know, the opponents after you in turn order are a little bit weaker than you right now. Probably better to hit them before they hit you. And presumably they will go with you on that because you're right. So Gisela is definitely removal bait if someone just has a Doomblade sitting around, but very strong, and you're probably going to get at least 1 turn cycle of value out of her. It's sort of like a pseudo goad, like their creatures aren't actually goaded, but they might as well attack. So last we have Rhea Dawnbringer. Love Rhea. 6 and triple white for a 4/6 legendary angel with flying that says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So don't worry about attacking. You're going to get your stuff back. Don't worry about your things dying. You're going to get your stuff back. You have not died until I consent. Banger of a piece of flavor text. Really cool. Those are the 41 cards I have in this section labeled legendaries. As I mentioned, the legendary stuff, there's 35 hits for Djeru for Djeru and Hazoret. So yeah, before we move on to our support, let's look at a couple of other things that will help us with our game plan. We've got a big section of synergy, but we've seen a lot of this. These synergy cards are meant to trigger off of what we're doing anyway and supplement it. For example, our Buzmir, as we already know, is going to ping each of our opponents and gain us a life whenever we have one of our historic permanents enter. Now we have Flowering of the White Tree. This is our legendary enchantment in the deck. So it's legendary, and so it will count as a historic card, even though it's not a legendary creature or a saga or an artifact. Flowering of the White Tree is double white for a legendary enchantment that says legendary creatures we control get +2/+1 and have ward 1, and non-legendary creatures we control get +1/+1. So it's a cheaper glorious anthem for our non-legendary creature, because we only have the 1, and for all of our other creatures, including our commander, +2/+1 and a little bit of protection in the form of ward 1, pretty great. Remember, this also, like I mentioned, is historic, so it triggers some good stuff. And of course, this is synergistic because it cares about our legendary creatures. Mary is synergistic because Mary also cares about legendary creatures, because when we attack with Mary and another legend, we draw a card. Mirror of Galadriel has a cost reduction effect based on our legendary creatures. Sarah Jane Smith lets us investigate when we cast historic spells. These are all good synergies. The Iron Crag can become a cool equipment when we cast when a legendary creature enters. Crown of Gondor is cheaper to equip if we're the Monarch, but we can become the Monarch when a legendary creature enters. Elena, of course, will bring back one of our historic cards from the graveyard to our hand, and when we cast it, a historic spell, Elena will get bigger. We've seen this Gimli, and how this Gimli can get counters whenever another legendary creature enters. Glowin, of course, gives us treasure when we cast historic spells. We haven't seen Patriarch's Seal. Patriarch's Seal from Baldur's Gate is 3 generic mana for a Manalith. It adds 1 mana of any color if we tap it. But also we can pay 1 and tap it to untap a legendary creature we control. This could be a surprise blocker. This could be to activate an activated ability, like, for example, Glowin's ability to sacrifice treasures and goad things. Or we may just want to simulate vigilance for some reason and represent a blocker before our opponent attacks so that they think twice about it, rather than surprising them with the blocker and maybe having to trade. Patriarch's Seal is a lot of fun. So is Relic of Legends. It's another Manalith, 3 mana rock that taps for 1 mana of any color, and we can tap another untapped legendary creature we control to add 1 mana of any color. That does not require us to also tap the relic. So our legendary creatures become Manaliths while this is in play. It gives us a great way to power some things out and sort of like pseudo-convoke with our legends. Seems good. We've seen Tegan. Tegan can give our historic creatures +1/+1 indestructible. The Peregrine Dynamo, of course, copies our legendaries' activated and triggered abilities. The Sarima finds us a legendary creature. Venet does so many things, but draws us a card once per turn when we cast legendary spells. Next up, we have Windcrag Siege from TDM, Tarkir Dragonstorm. For 1 a red and a white, we have an enchantment that says, as it enters, we choose Mardu or Jeskai. If we choose Mardu, we get the ability, if a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent we control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Or if we choose Jeskai, it gets, at the beginning of our upkeep, we create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that gains lifelink and haste until end of turn. In this deck, unless we have a really good reason to choose Jeskai, we're choosing Mardu every time. Because this doubles the trigger of our commander. It doubles the trigger of so many of our other cards that care about attacking. We want the Mardu triggers here. Windcrag Siege is a great synergy for that. Next up, we've seen Kadrik. How Kadrik can give us bonus token legendaries whenever we cast non-token legendaries. But we also have Day of Destiny, which is another legendary enchantment. We have 2 of them, surprise. It's 3 and a white that is just an anthem for our legendary creatures. It's a legendary enchantment too, so it's also historic, but that's all it takes. Just all of our stuff is +2/+2 for 4 mana. That's worth it. Now we have Wild Magic Sorcerer. This is the one creature we have in the deck that is not legendary. Wild Magic Sorcerer is totally worth it, even though it is a little bit of a pricier card. For 3 and a red, we have a 4/3 Orc Shaman that gives the first spell we cast from exile each turn, Cascade. So how are we casting spells from exile? We have a few ways, but the trigger on Djeru and Hazoret is the one we have it in the deck for. So this Wild Magic Sorcerer just sits on the battlefield, waiting for us to attack with our commander, and then after that combat, we'll cast one of the legends that we found with it and cascade into something else. Cascade, if you're unfamiliar, means when you cast the spell that has Cascade, you flip cards off the top of your library, exile them technically, until you find a non-land that costs less than the spell with Cascade, which you can then, as part of the resolution of this ability, cast for free. Then all the ones that you exiled that weren't that go on the bottom of your library in a random order. So essentially, anytime Djeru and Hazoret triggers, if Wild Magic Sorcerer is in play by the time we cast that spell that Djeru and Hazoret exiled, we're going to get 2 things off of it. Pretty good. 2 things are better than just the one. Next is Banish to Another Universe. This is one of our most useful removal spells. It is an O-ring. For 4 and a white, it says when this enchantment enters, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. It's Banishing Light. However, it has affinity for historic permanents. So for each historic permanent we have in play, which means every artifact, every legend, and every saga, it costs 1 generic less to cast. So Banish to Another Universe in our deck is typically 1 white to O-ring something, to Banishing Light something. Pretty great. We've seen Bayek. Bayek has synergy because it gives double strike to our other historic creatures. Gandalf gives our legendary spells and artifacts flash and also doubles some of their triggers. God Eternal Laketra is only in this section because we have such a creature-heavy deck, but every time we cast a creature spell, we get a 4/4 with Vigilance. Pretty alright. Hero's Podium, of course, as we've seen, makes all of our legends very big, and we can draw more legends with it. And then Searcher lightning bolts things when we cast historic spells. Lots and lots of synergy going on here. We've got one more section that we've already covered, technically, but I want to touch on it right here because it is part of our game plan. We want to double up on our triggers, and we've seen several different ways to do that in the synergy section. Our triggers for Djeru and Hazoret, that is. But I want to remind you, Eomer gives us the ability to get a second attack. As long as we have one of our attacking legendary creatures die, we get to attack again. If Djeru and Hazoret wasn't the thing that died, we're going to attack with them again and get another trigger. The same is true for Aurelia, when Aurelia gives us our second combat each turn, and Morag, when Morag gives us more combat phases thanks to Landfall. We want to be able to use these as sort of pseudo-synergy to get more Djeru and Hazoret triggers, and therefore more free legends onto the battlefield. We want to just power them out. So we have a few more cards that go toward our game plan in the form of supporting it, or rather supplementing, I should say. But let's talk about these three categories of support right now. We're going to start with card advantage, which I have tagged as draw just as a shorthand to make it quicker for us. So we've seen the Horn of Mark. If we attack with 2 or more creatures, we get to look at the top 5 and reveal a creature and put it in our hand. That's card advantage. Mary can let us draw a card when we attack with Mary and another legend. Now for the Mind Stone. We love the Mind Stone. For 2 generic, we get an artifact that taps for a colorless, or we can pay 1, tap, and sack it to draw a card. Usually this is just a 2-mana rock. We want to be able to use this for ramp, but we have it, if we need it, to draw cards. Mirror of Galadriel eventually is just tap and opt, so that gives us some good card advantage. Sarah Jane Smith, when we cast historic spells, we make clues. That's card advantage. Arnie can give us more creatures onto the battlefield. That seems pretty good, seems pretty advantageous. Crown of Gondor, of course, only gives us card advantage in that it can make us the Monarch, but the Monarch is great, and we're going to draw at least 1 card from that. Elena brings a card back from our graveyard to our hand. Lelia exiles cards that we can then play. That's card advantage. Lauren we can tap so that we and one other opponent draw a card. That's an advantage over the ones that didn't. The Sarima tutors for a legendary creature, puts it in our hand. Venet lets us maybe draw multiple cards, just 1 per turn. Belborca exiles the top card of our library at the start of our upkeep. So we can play that this turn, so that's card advantage. Now we have another new one. War of the Last Alliance from Lord of the Rings. This is the 1 saga in our deck. For 3 and a white, we get a saga that says, for the first and second chapters, search your library for a legendary creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. So this is the same thing that we're getting from the Sarima. We're just drawing a card at the start of our main phase. Well, rather, once this hits the battlefield and at the start of our next main phase. And then on the final chapter, creatures we control gain double strike until end of turn, and the ring tempts us. So we get even more ring tempting beyond just what we had from Boromir. So that's a little bit helpful. But here is the card advantage, and here is the thing that maybe wins us the game. Next up, Wild Magic Sorcerer. It's advantageous to us to cascade into something every time we cast something from exile, so that maybe at least once a turn. Aurelia will draw us a card when a player attacks with 3 or more creatures. Liara, whenever we attack, we're going to be able to exile at least 1 card off the top of our library that we can play this turn. We can cast the spell of this turn at least. Hero's Podium can let us dig for cards. Itali gets us cards off the top of our library and our opponent's libraries. And of course, Rhea brings creatures back to the battlefield for free from our graveyard. That's a lot of cards tagged for card advantage. but most of them are doing something else as well. So yeah, next up is our acceleration section, which again, it's acceleration, I'm just shorthanding it as ramp. Everyone knows Soul Ring. Soul Ring costs 1, taps for 2, we want it in our deck. Next is Wayfarer's Bauble, which I think is a great card in a white and red deck. For 1 generic mana, we get an artifact that we can pay 2, tap, and sacrifice to Rampant Growth. We just put Rampant Growth in our deck. It just costs 1 more mana, but all of those mana are generic. So search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, shuffle. Pretty good in a deck that struggles a little bit to ramp. We have Arcane Signet, of course. Arcane Signet costs 2 and taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So it taps for 2, costs 2 rather, taps for white or red. Fire Diamond and Marble Diamond are worse versions of Arcane Signet, but they're good redundancy. Both of them are the same in that they cost 2 and come in tapped. Fire Diamond taps for red, Marble Diamond taps for white. But they're just 2 mana rocks. It doesn't matter that we can't tap them right away. Mind Stone, as we've already seen, we can tap right away, but it makes generic mana. But we can also pay 1 tap and sack it to draw a card later. We've seen the Sword of the Animist and how it can Rampant Growth us whenever we attack with the equipped creature. We've seen the Iron Crag, which is a 2 mana rock that taps for generic mana, comes in untapped, so it's similar to the Mind Stone in that way. And of course, we've seen the rest of these. Gimli can make us treasure whenever he deals combat damage to a player. Glowin makes treasure whenever we cast a historic spell once each turn. Patriarch Seal and Relic of Legends are both manaliths, and Relic of Legend, of course, can make our legendary creatures also tap for mana. Next up, we have our interaction section, which again, I've just shorthanded as removal. We have Lightning Bolt. Costs 1 red, deals 3 damage to any target. It's Lightning Bolt. It was in alpha. You can use a cheaper printing if you want, but I love the Strixhaven Mystical Archive, so that's what I'm going to do. Lightning Bolt in any red deck. Similarly, Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares in any white deck. Both of these cards do the same thing with one difference. They are both 1 white mana, they are instants, and they exile a creature. Path to Exile lets that creature's controller Rampant Growth. Swords to Plowshares gives that creature's controller power equal to the creature's, or gives that creature's controller life equal to the creature's power. But otherwise, these are just 1 white mana to exile the thing you need to get off the battlefield. Solid. Next we have Wings of Abandon from Modern Horizons. 1 and a white for a sorcery that says exile target creature you don't control. For each creature exiled this way, its controller searches their library for a basic land. Those players put those cards onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. All of that to say, this is a more expensive sorcery speed Path to Exile. Exiles a creature we don't control, and it's more restrictive in that way too because you can path your own creatures. Exiles a creature we don't control, its controller gets to search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. That's just Path to Exile. So why do we have this in here? Because this is removal, if we need it to be, but it's also a wrath, because we can overload it. If we overload it for 4 and double white, we're casting it for that cost rather than the 1 and a white, and we change target to each, which just means exile each creature you don't control. Winds of Abandon, if we cast it for 6, gets rid of every creature on the battlefield that isn't ours. But our opponents, get the controllers of those creatures that are exiled, get to Rampant Growth for each creature. That's pretty good for them, but it does mean that we're the only one with creatures. So if we cast this pre-combat, that may mean the game is over for someone. It doesn't matter how many cards they've gotten into play. How many lands, that is. Next up, we've seen Lauren. Lauren can enter the battlefield and disenchant something. We've seen Venet and how Venet, for 7 and tap, can exile a non-land permanent. We've seen Eowyn, who exiles a creature an opponent controls with greater power when it enters. And Banished to another universe comes in and Oblivion Rings something. Searcher can lightning bolt things when we cast historic spells, and Drakaseth does 4 damage to one thing and 3 damage to up to 2 other things whenever it attacks. Plenty of removal in white and in red. Finally, for this section, we have 2 Wraths. We've just seen Winds of Abandon. Of course, it essentially Path to Exiles every creature we don't control if we use it for its overload cost. But we also have Urza's Ruinous Blast. Great card, and I'm glad that they have new art for it. Urza's Ruinous Blast is 4 and a white for a legendary sorcery, which means we cannot cast this unless we control a legendary creature or planeswalker. So that's not that much of a disadvantage for us, but if, I don't know, if somebody has just Winds of Abandoned us, and all of our creatures are gone, and we want to get rid of their creatures, and we have the Ruinous Blast in our hand, we can't cast it until we cast a legendary creature. We don't have any planeswalkers in the deck. What does it do? Exiles all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. So it's unfortunate. That's going to hit our Soul Ring. That's going to hit our Wild Magic Sorcerer. We have a few cards in this deck that will get hit by Urza's Ruinous Blast. But everyone at the table who isn't themselves playing a Legends deck is going to probably be hurt worse than us. Urza's Ruinous Blast is great in any Legends deck that runs white. So those are our support sections. We have a few more cards to round this out that supplement our game plan without being a huge part of it. This is our protection section. We start off with Reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is an older card, but I'm using the Assassin's Creed printing because it's a little cheaper. For a single white, we get an enchantment that says, pay 0 generic mana and remove target attacking creature you control from combat and untap it. That is not the cost, that is the effect. So we can take, at the very least, Djeru and Hazoret, attack with them, and before blocks, remove them from combat. They still attacked, they're just no longer attacking. So when they attacked, they got their trigger, and now they're back. We don't have to worry about them being blocked or damaged as part of combat because they're not in combat anymore. However, we can also, and I love that they put this reminder text here, we can do this after combat damage because there are 5 steps to the combat phase, and the last one is end of combat. Happens after combat damage, which is the 4th step. So if we do it post-combat damage and our creature survived, we can use Reconnaissance to untap it. And now it's removed from combat, but doesn't matter. Combat is essentially over. We've already done our combat damage. And we can do this as many times as we want for as many creatures as we have, because it only costs us 0 to do so. Reconnaissance is a really cool card. We've seen Flowering of the White Tree. It protects our creatures because it gives our legendary creatures Ward 1. Boromir can make our creatures indestructible. Glowin can goad other creatures, which makes it so we're protected from being attacked from them. Redain, of course, can protect us several different ways, but particularly with Valkmira, by giving us a little bit of ward and by preventing damage specifically. Tegan makes our attacking historic creature a little bigger and gives it indestructible. The Sarima, once we've got it stationed up to 7, if our legendary creatures are tapped, they are indestructible. Venet, on the backside, can do something similar to Tegan in the sense of giving another creature we control indestructible until end of turn, as well as a 1/1 counter. Eowyn gives our legendary creatures protection from the colors of the creature that Eowyn exiles when it enters. Gerard is not really protecting our creatures, but if our creatures die, they're going to come right back. That's Gerard protecting them in a way. Audric can protect our creatures in the form of making it so we don't have to worry about blocks being advantageous to our opponent. We get to choose how blocking is happening. Gisela protects our things, and us, of course, because we're taking half damage from everything. So yeah, that is our protection section. Next up, I have a section called Pump. The Pump section is right here. Flowering of the White Tree is an Anthem effect. Gives all of our creatures a little bit of a bonus. Legendary creatures get a little more. Sword of the Animist gives an equipment bonus to our equipped creature. The Iron Crag does the same thing once it has turned into Everflame Hero's Legacy. Crown of Gondor gives quite a big bump to whatever creature it is equipped to. Tegan and Venet, of course, when Venet is on the Hydaelyn side. Tegan gives a temporary +1/+1 to the attacking historic creature. Hydaelyn gives a 1/1 counter to a creature. Day of Destiny is a double anthem. All of our legends +2/+2. Jazal We can activate for 3 in white to give all of our creatures +X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Adriana gives our creatures melee, which gives them a bonus. Baek gives our creatures, it's not really a pump, but I figured it was worth mentioning, giving our other historic creatures double strike as a benefit that way. Works a little like a pump. And then, of course, Hero's Podium gives all of our legends +1/+1 for every other legend we control, so a huge Anthem effect. Next, we have an Evasion section, which seems small, but I have tagged these this way in order to have the tags persist into the Considering section. There are some creatures in the Considering section that also give an evasive ability. Eowyn gives evasion in the form of protection. Creatures that our creatures are protected from can't block our creatures. And of course, Audric makes our creatures evasive because we get to decide if they're being blocked. And then last, we have a tokens section, just to generate additional things we might want to see in play. Windcrack Siege, we're probably not going to choose Jeskai, but if we did, we would get a token goblin. Kadric makes token copies of our creatures. They only last for the 1 turn, but that's enough to swing in with them. And of course, God Eternal Oketra gives us 4/4 Vigilance zombie warriors whenever we cast any creature spells. So that covers all of the spells in our deck. Let's briefly go over our land base. We have 20 basic lands, 12 plains, 8 mountains. This was the best sort of balance that I could go with. I think it works for us. We're running Boros Garrison as our bounce land. Love bounce lands because they don't just tap for 2 mana, but they ensure we're going to make our land drop next turn. So it comes in tapped. When it comes in, we have to bounce a land we already control. So we can play that again next turn, and we're making our land drop. Clifftop Retreat is a dual land that enters tapped unless we control a mountain or a plains. In this deck, those are just these 20 basics. We don't have any typed duals. So you could certainly upgrade this if you want. Maybe a slow land like Sundown Pass would be a little more consistent. It's more likely to come in untapped, but it does cost more than the Clifftop Retreat. Or of course you could run typed duals or run some upgrades to things like a Surveil land that we'll talk about in a moment, which is also a mountain or a plains. So Clifftop Retreat would be more likely to come in untapped. But I mean, this is 20% of your deck. You're pretty likely to get this untapped. Next, we have some fixing lands. Of course, we're running Command Tower. It comes in untapped, taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. It's just like Arcane Signet in that way, but as a land. We're running Path of Ancestry for the same reason. It comes in tapped, but does the same thing as Command Tower. However, if we use the mana that it generates to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we also get a Scry out of it. Scry 1. This is good because of 2 things. The first is our commander shares creature types with itself. So if we use Path of Ancestry to cast Djeru and Hazoret, we get the Scry off of it. In addition, Djeru and Hazoret is a human god. We have 14 other humans in the deck and 4 other gods in the deck. So 20% of our deck-ish is something we can scry off of with Path of Ancestry when we cast it. We've got Temple of the False God as well. Temple of the False God is a card that I know some people don't think is worth running. In the budget decks that I build, I think it still is. Also, it's not a bad card. It's a Soul Ring. It just doesn't work early game on a land. So it taps for 2 colorless, but we can only activate it if we control 4 other lands. So 5 or more lands, including itself. So it's not an early game Soul Ring, but early game Soul Ring should be restricted to just Soul Ring. That's fine. We also have these 2 soft fetches. Evolving Wilds, play it, tap it, sack it, go find a basic. Get it in and play tapped. It's great. Myriad Landscape comes in tapped and taps for colorless, but we can also pay 2, tap and sack it to find 2 basics that share a land type. So this lets us shore up whatever color we need a little bit more of. It might not always be white because we might have just already played a couple of plains. We might need to get some mountains. So yeah, Myriad Landscape, a little bit of ramp on a land. Next up, we are running Battlefield Forge. It's a Pain land. Pain lands are fine. It comes in untapped. We can tap it for a colorless. If we really need the color, we can take damage from doing so. And if we wanted, we could upgrade this to a Sacred Foundry, the shock land, which means that it might not come in untapped. But if we need it to, we take 2 damage right there, and that's just 2 damage, which might be less than we would have to pay to this, or take from this, I should say, over the course of the game. I love the pathways. Anyone who knows me knows I like these things. If you can find them, they're not super cheap, they're not super expensive. They are modal double-faced cards. Comes in either as Needle Verge pathway and taps for red, or Pillar Verge pathway and taps for white. Flexibility. I'm running Temple of Triumph in this deck, which is a scry land, comes in tapped, and when it does, we scry 1, and otherwise it's a dual land. If you want to upgrade this to the Surveil land, which is Elegant Parlor, I believe, that would also be fine. You'd get a Surveil out of it, which is a little better than a scry sometimes, but also it's typed the way that Sacred Foundry is, so maybe you'd be able to get more value out of your check land with that. And then finally, we have 8 utility lands. Clive's Hideaway is the first. This is from the Final Fantasy set. Not surprisingly, this has Hideaway 4, which means when it comes in, we look at the top 4 cards of our library, exile 1 face down under this land, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. It does not come in tapped like the old Hideaway lands. It just taps for colorless. But we can pay 2 generic and tap Clive's Hideaway to play the exiled card for free at any time we control 4 or more legendary creatures. So yeah, that's a timing permission, so we don't have to do that only on our turn if it's like a creature, for example. So yeah. Next we have Demolition Field. I like this card. I think that most people seem to consider land destruction to be rude in Commander, but you need a little removal if someone's got a problem land like a Maze of Ith that you can't get through, or a Rogue's Passage for the other reason. And if it only hits non-basics, I think that's okay, especially if it lets you replace them, which Demolition Field does. So this taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap and sack it to destroy a non-basic an opponent controls. Then they get to find a basic and put it in untapped, and so do we. So neither of us are down a land, we're both just down a utility land. That's pretty okay. Next we have Minas Tirith. Nope, Minas Tirith, there it is. Sorry, Lord of the Rings lovers. This comes in tapped unless we control a legendary creature, so generally this is a Plains. Adds white, comes in untapped. But we can also pay 1 and a white and tap it to draw a card if we attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn. This is a Boros deck. This is a land that's going to come in untapped, and we're going to tap 3 lands essentially to draw a card whenever we do this. It's a better Bonder's Enclave for us. We also have Monumental Hinge from Modern Horizons 3. This is a land that will enter tapped unless we control a Plains. So another reason, like the check land reason, we might want to run typed duels. Still, we've got 12 Plains, which is about 1/8 of our deck. So that's okay. And if it comes in tapped, it's not the end of the world. Monumental Hinge taps for white, or we can pay 2 and 2 white and tap it to board the Weatherlight, which is look at the top 5, reveal a historic card from among them, put it in our hand, put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Board the Weatherlight is a solid playable card in a deck like this. We're not running it because we wanted to run more legends, so having it as a repeatable use on Monumental Hinge on one of our lands is great. Next we have Plaza of Heroes. A little expensive for a land, but worth it. It comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can tap it for 1 mana of any color that we only use on legendary spells, or we can tap it for 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents we control. So as long as we're running our commander, or any other white and red card, or any other white card and also red card, as long as they're legendary, we can tap this like it's our command tower. Pretty good. In addition, for 3 and tap and exile it, we can give one of our legendary creatures hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So Plaza of Heroes does it all for us. Rogue's Passage is in this deck because we're here to swing in. We might be able to win with commander damage depending on what we have outfitted our commander with. Rogue's Passage will let us do that. It comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it to make one of our creatures unblockable. Or it does say target creature. We can use this politically. We can say, look, I know you can't get through, opponent A, I know you can't get through opponent B's blockers. I will use my Rogue's Passage to make your creature unblockable if you leave me alone. Seems pretty good. You can even not have to trust them for that sort of thing. You wait until they attack, then use Rogue's Passage before declaration of blockers, so you know that they're not going to, take their unblockable creature and attack you with it. We also have Slayer's Stronghold. This is a land that comes in untapped, taps for a colorless, or we can pay a red and a white and tap it to give target creature +2/+2, vigilance, and haste until end of turn. So this might be something we can use that second ability on the moment a creature comes in if we want to. Just swing in with them. Finally, we have Tyrite Sanctum. Tyrite Sanctum from Kaldheim initially is an untapped land that taps for colorless. We can pay 2 and tap it to make a legendary creature into a god in addition to its other types, and it gets a counter on it. Or we can pay 4, tap, and sack the Sanctum to put an indestructible counter on a god. We have 5 gods in this deck, and one of them is our commander. So if we had the mana for it, if Djeru and Hazoret is in play, we could drop the Sanctum, tap 4, or pay 4, tap, and sack the Sanctum right away, and immediately our commander is indestructible. Just as long as it's got that counter on it. Seems really powerful, seems like a lot of fun. So that wraps up our deck. Thanks for watching, everyone. Again, I'm going to be making a deck for each of the March of the Machine legends, so let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or a deck style. Again, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and remember, Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.